Ancient History, Part 1. What is history? Most would probably define history as the record and contextualization of past events. However, interpreting past events requires boiling them down to the quote-unquote key ones, which most of the time capture the essence of an era or a turning point, while remaining quote-unquote objective. Importantly, this is a difficult task because while events are binary, interpretation and contextualization is grounded in the subjective nature of the human mind. Like all other academic pursuits, history requires focus. In biology, for example, if you want to know whether gene X is necessary for phenotype Y, you might inhibit gene X to see if phenotype Y persists. You won't simultaneously keep track of all other phenotypes because they don't pertain to your study. However, choosing which events are linked to the event of interest is tricky, and history can fall victim to propaganda, often ideological Manichaean propaganda, portraying the nation in which one lives as the heroic protagonist. For example, the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II is rarely taught in American schools, and Chinese pupils are not taught about the Tiananmen Square massacre. Perhaps history is simultaneously the optimization of the quote-unquote objectivity of the contextualization of events, and philosophically an exercise in faith in others that this is done without any Machiavellian intent. So when does history begin? One could argue that it begins with the start of humanity. However, calling what precedes it as evolutionary biological events and what precedes that as chemical and physical quote-unquote miracles, which later amounted to life, just demonstrates how the language written by our ancestors guides our living thought processes. However, let us begin with the start of what has been recorded, or in other words, life since the fruit of thought and language, since the invention or revelation of writing. Introduction. Ancient history encapsulates the last 3000 BC, the years 3000 BC to 500 AD, with the expansion of Islam. It is usually divided into a three-stage system: the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age, with recorded history beginning during the Bronze Age. Interestingly, while the Bronze Age is thought to have begun a few centuries before 3000 BC, the end of the Iron Age varies regionally, from early 1st millennium BC in some places to late 1st millennium AD in others. Importantly, ancient history is thought to be a time of demographic, exponential growth in terms of the population density due to the Neolithic or agricultural revolution. During this time, people across civilizations shifted away from nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyles towards agricultural settlements. In fact, the population is thought to have increased from 2 million in 10,000 BC to 45 million in 3000 BC. Again, by the Iron Age, the global population is thought to have increased to 72 million. By the end of the ancient period, the world population stood at 209 million. Prehistory. Before ancient history is the time period referred to as prehistory. This is the period before written history, and our records from this period come from the work of archaeologists. The Homo genus of great apes constitutes humans, all of which are extinct except for us, Homo sapiens. It diverged from the hominin genus Pan, which includes bonobos and chimpanzees, which are still alive today, between 5.7 and 11 million years ago. 2 million years ago, Homo habilis, the oldest species of the Homo genus, emerged. 1.8 million years ago, Homo erectus left Africa to spread across Eurasia. They also developed fire for the first time around this time, although the date for the human discovery of fire is contested. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals emerged between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago in Africa and Eurasia, respectively. Around 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens migrated outside of Africa, reaching around the globe and finally getting to America around 15,000 years ago. Evidence for the beginning of agriculture was found in Turkey and spreading to the Fertile Crescent about 9,000 BC, with evidence of sorghum and millet cultivation starting around 8,000 BC in the Nile River Valley. While dogs were domesticated around 15,000 years ago, sheep and goats were domesticated around 9,000 BC and cattle around 7,000 BC, and horses, donkeys, and camels around 4,000 BC. Not only were these animals used for food, they were also used to facilitate work efficiency. The simple plow was invented in 6000 BC to loosen soil before planting seeds to further increase agricultural efficiency. Furthermore, while metal tools predate the discovery of smelting copper ores, this first happened in 6000 BC in Western Asia. Alloy metallurgy began in 3500 in Mesopotamia with bronze, which combines copper and tin, which is harder than copper alone. The potter's wheel was also developed between 5000 and 4000 BC. This was then adapted into wheeled vehicles pulled by animals. Finally, to conclude prehistory and begin ancient history, the invention or revelation of writing occurred independently in 5 regions of the world: Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, and Mesoamerica. By 3400 BC, pro-literate cuneiform spread in the Middle East by pressing a pointed reed stylus into wet clay tablets to track everyday items like bread, beer, rations, and livestock. It could also express abstract ideas, laws, and emotions. Over its 3,000-year active history, it was adopted by over 15 cultures, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and Persians. The Epic of Gilgamesh is widely considered the world's oldest piece of epic literature, containing ancient flood myths and existential poetry. Similarly, the Code of Hammurabi is one of the earliest and most complete written legal codes, establishing the principle of an eye for an eye. West Asia. Mesopotamia, which translated from Greek as the land between two rivers, was located between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers in modern-day Iraq. It was the cradle of human civilization, where the practice of year-round agriculture, coherent writing, the potter's wheel, the wheeled vehicle, government, law, slavery, organized warfare, and the study of astronomy and mathematics began. In Lower Mesopotamia, Hammurabi created an empire out of the territories of the former kingdoms of Sumer and Akkad called Babylonia, with Babylon as its capital. Chaldea, or the Neo-Babylonian Empire from 7th to 6th centuries BC, created the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, according to Hellenistic culture. It later fell to the Persian Empire. Later, the Persian Achaemenid Empire expanded by building roads, facilitating trade and the communication of intellectual ideas, all the way from Libya and Greece to India. The empire fell to Alexander the Great in 330 BC. Other ancient civilizations in the regions include the Hittites, who improved ironworking and light chariots with spoked wheels in warfare, Israelis, who were perceived as a threat to their hegemony by the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, who traded across the Mediterranean, invented the forerunner to the modern alphabet, and lost their colony Carthage in modern-day Tunisia to Rome during the Punic Wars, and the Arabians, about whom little is known before the expansion of Islam in the 630s AD. End of Ancient History, Part 1.